Hi everybody, it's Randy Ray, host of The Literate Texan, where we talk about books, highbrow, lowbrow, anything in between. We're not picky here. Today I have a special announcement about an event created by Michael K. Vaughn called Rocket Summer. Rocket Summer is an event that celebrates classic science fiction books from the 30s or earlier, from the 40s, from the 50s, and from the 60s. And the event takes place in July, which is a great time to read science fiction. And it leads right into Garb-August. It gives you something to do before Garb-August in August. If you don't know what that is, take a look at, just type in Garb-August in the search box and you'll find a bunch of videos about it too. But at any rate, to participate in Rocket Summer, all you have to do is read some science fiction books from the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. You're probably already doing that, right? So I've already got mine picked out, and the idea is that there are 4 weeks in July, so there's 1 week for each decade. So the first week is devoted to the 1930s and earlier. So if you wanted to go all the way back to stuff like H.G. Wells and Robert Louis Stevenson, you certainly could. But I prefer to actually do the 1930s because that was a pretty cool decade for science fiction. It was the pulp era for science fiction was the 1930s. And then, of course, there's the 1940s in week 2. You'll read a book from there. There's the 1950s in week 3. You'll read a book from the 50s there. And then week 4 is of course, the 1960s, which was the start of the new wave. So I've got some notes here, and I've got my TBR already made out since it's only 4 books. Okay, so the 1930s, that was the age of pulp science fiction. So this is when Astounding Magazine and Amazing Magazine were getting their starts, were becoming really popular. I believe John W. Campbell was the editor for Astounding Science Fiction Magazine, hugely influential on the genre altogether. And, when you think about science fiction from the 1930s, you should probably think about something a little more primitive than what you're used to now. We're talking about ray guns and men in spacesuits traveling to other planets and stuff. And so my pick for this decade, for the 1930s, I had to take notes because I don't want to miss anything. Okay, there's a book by E. Doc Smith called Galactic Patrol. Okay, and so most of these are really affordable on the Kindle, and that's where I got these. But the cover art, they're probably out of copyright, but the cover art is not anything that's going to impress anybody here. So, but that's okay because I think the magic is in the fun of the words and the stories. But E. Doc Smith is famous for creating a series called the Lensman series, which I understand is at least in part the inspiration for Green Lantern, which some of you may be familiar with if you're a comic book fan. But anyway, there's the brilliant cover art for Galactic Patrol by E. Doc Smith. I'm looking forward to reading that because it's supposed to be all about interstellar battles and the Lensman and keeping peace in outer space. So it sounds like a Western in space, but big space opera stuff, and I'm totally down for that. I did look for a couple of other options that I might mention. Okay, so there's The Shadow Out of Time by H.P. Lovecraft was written in the 30s, and this is just an example of how, H.P. Lovecraft is normally thought of as a horror writer, but in the infancy of science fiction, his stuff would have been considered science fiction as well, especially The Shadow Out of Time, which has to do with alien stuff, even more so than most of his stuff. But that's also, that's H.P. Lovecraft. That was published in Astounding Magazine. The Black Star Passes by John W. Campbell. That's a collection of short stories that John W. Campbell himself wrote. So that would probably be a really good book if you're interested in 1930s science fiction because, this guy was the editor who set the direction for that sort of thing. He's really, really famous if you look into the history of science fiction. And then finally, Last and First Men by Olaf Stapleton. I don't know much about it, but somebody assured me that would be a good pick for the 1930s. Okay, so the 1940s, moving on, this is where the golden age of science fiction really came into its own, okay? So you still had Astounding Magazine being shepherded by John W. Campbell, but now the focus started to change from, ray guns and action to scientific believability and logic. But the themes were still related to old-fashioned heroism and stuff. Odysseus in space, so to speak. Also, of course, in the 1940s, the history of the world is moving on. You got war, atomic power, all becoming issues. And great literature, or even poor literature, reflects what's going on at the time around them. And that's science fiction is not an exception. You know, atomic power became something that was thinly veiled theme for a lot of these books. So I've got, I've got a pick for this one. It's called Slan by A.E. van Vogt. It's about, from what I understand, it's about telepathic mutants who are being persecuted. So that sounds pretty good. Probably the influence for maybe something that came later like the X-Men. I don't know and won't know till I've read it, but that's what it sounds like. It sounded like as good a place as any to start my 1940s science fiction journey. I've got a couple other recommendations here. The Weapon Shop of Ishtar. That sounds really good, although every time I hear the word Ishtar, I think of that Dustin Hoffman film that was supposed to be so bad. And it wasn't as bad as everybody said it was, to my recollection. That's also by A.E. van Vogt, who was prolific during this time period. There's also a book called City by Clifford Simak. Clifford Simak's very popular on BookTube. I think largely as a result of Sean D. Standfast. He's a really big fan. And then Darkness and the Light by Olaf Stapleton, another one that's been recommended. But, you know, these guys were cross decades, I guess. You know, they didn't stop at one decade's end and started one decade's beginning. You know, they overlapped a lot. So 1950s. Oh, I didn't show you my cover art for the second book in my Slan. Let me see if I can pull it up right quick. This is even more impressive artwork here. Okay, come on now. There we go. That was basically, if you saw it, it disappeared really quickly. Let me get to the page again. Maybe it'll stay on the page this time. These things are so hard to work. Now it just went out altogether. Anyway, the artwork's not impressive enough for me to carry and go back for that one. All right, so, and then, let's see, where am I at? This is the problem with taking notes. You have to keep up with where you're at in the notes. 1950s. Okay, in the 1950s, now you got the Cold War going on, but you've also got flying saucers. I've been watching some science fiction movies from the 1950s inspired by this. And I watched The Day the Earth Stood Still the other day. And I'll tell you what, well, that movie sure does hold up. It's just absolutely terrific. I love The Day the Earth Stood Still. Also, in terms of science fiction films from the 50s, I don't think you can top The Day the Earth Stood Still, but if you can, you'd top it with Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which is also really terrific and also has some Cold War metaphor. I'm trying to open this damn Kindle so I can show you the artwork for these covers, and it doesn't want to open for me. Cover art's no good on any of these anyway. So, the book I'm reading for the 1950s is The Cosmic Puppets by Philip K. Dick. I've read a bit of Philip K. Dick, and I want to read a little more. And so I chose this one, even though, you know, I don't think he's emblematic of the 1950s in science fiction at all. I think he's more of a 60s guy. But he was certainly working. I mean, the guy wrote 44 science fiction novels, from what I understand. So, yeah, this one sounds good. This one sounds really good, actually. It's about an ordinary man. He returns to his hometown, and his hometown is vaguely similar to what he remembered it being, but it's changed in lots of really weird ways, which makes him start to question reality. You know, it's not like he went back and things were just different now. He went back and things were different. Like it's not even the same town. So that looks really cool. There's some other ideas. The 50s are easy. There's lots to choose from. More Than Human by Theodore Sturgeon is also on my list. That's a fix-up novel. A fix-up novel is something they did. It was popular in the early days of science fiction, where they would take a group of short stories and put them all together into a novel. And even your big-name science fiction authors like Isaac Asimov would do fix-up novels. You know, the Foundation trilogy was originally fix-up novels. So I'm probably going to read 2 novels from the 50s. I'm probably going to read More Than Human also, because I'm a big Theodore Sturgeon fan. But I've also got Mission of Gravity by Hal Clement here as a suggestion, and The Long Tomorrow by Lee Brackett. Lee Brackett's real famous for space opera type stuff, so that's probably worth checking out too. And the final decade is the 1960s. That's when new wave science fiction started getting to be something. And, you know, the tone became more literally. They started to take into account themes like gender and identities, the nature of consciousness, the nature of reality, and, of course, authoritarianism, because everybody was was down on authoritarianism in the 1960s. I mean, this was the age of the hippies after all. And I chose another Philip K. Dick novel called The Zap Gun for this one. It just sounds like fun. It's 1967 publication from him. The Zap Gun is about, from what I understand, it's set in the not so distant future, but the major powers on Earth have each other convinced that they have these powerful weapons, but they don't really have them. They're just weapons that they've made up in the news. And when aliens come to attack Earth, the two powers get together and realize, hey, wait a minute, we don't have any real weapons to fight these aliens with. We've just been, doing all this stuff on the tube, so what are we going to do? I guess they have to come up with weapons. But anyway, sounds like a whole lot of fun. But I've got a list of other ones to think about from the 60s. I've always meant to read A Canticle for Leibowitz by Walter Miller. I believe that's a post-apocalyptic novel. I don't know much about it other than, it's always on the recommended list. There's a book called Nova by Samuel Delaney. It came up when I was doing the research for this. But the one I think would probably be the most interesting from the 60s, besides the one I've chosen, is Make Room by Harry Harrison, which was the basis for the movie Soylent Green. Soylent Green is a science fiction movie with Edward G. Robinson as the supporting actor. Charlton Heston is the supporting lead. And if I got to program my local movie theater, my local repertory theater, I would definitely put together a triple feature night titled Charlton Heston Can't Save the Future. And the three movies would be Soylent Green, of course, Planet of the Apes, and The Omega Man, because they're all about Charlton Heston and his failure to save the future. So anyway, I think that would be fun. I don't know about you. I'm going to leave the names and the co-hosts down below in the description. So be sure to check out their videos too. If this sounds like something you're going to participate in, maybe mention some of the books that you're thinking about reading in the comments below. I'd appreciate that. And, have you heard of the books that I chose? Do you think maybe there were better choices for each decade that I might have made? Let me know in the comments. I love to have a conversation, and I haven't put up a video in a while, so I haven't got too much conversations going on at the moment. But yeah, love y'all in the comments. Got two more things to say before I log off today. One is, please stay hydrated. It's so much more important than you probably think. And two, stay sexy, folks. That's just for fun.